Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am joined today by my brother, the Gritty Broman. How are you, Brent?
I'm well. Thank you.
Good. Today, I wanted to touch briefly on, it should be a short podcast, but they're never really that short. But crossing creeks, crossing rivers, crossing streams, a lot of times you'll find yourself in an area trapped from accessing a spot because you got water in the way, some kind of waterway blocking you. So one of the things that we've learned over the years, and there's a number of tactics that we will use. One of the first things to do when you're going into an area, though, is actually scout it, e-scout it before you go. So then what I'm about to tell you, you can leverage, you can pack all the right stuff, carry the right gear for the particular trip that you're on. I can't stress enough that being able to get across rivers is a huge game changer, because 99% of the folks out there won't have the gear to get across a river or even a creek or a swollen stream, you know. So, and one of the things that you want to avoid is crossing rivers can be dangerous. So having the right equipment, a lot of times that's where people get hurt or where people die. I often cross logs, which I'm chastised for every time by Ryan Lampers. Crossing on a log is a skill all in of itself. There's its own discussion with tactics and things. But whether you're crossing a log or you're getting across in chota waders or whatever, if you're not using a boat, trekking poles are critical. There's a reason like fly fishermen have wading staffs and stuff. I mean, it's rocky, it's shifty, the ground, you got current that's pushing you, you got slimy rocks you're crossing on. Having trekking poles gives you those 4 legs instead of 2, gives you all that stability so you don't slip and fall. It's a must. You got to have trekking poles crossing rivers if you don't want to end up in the drink. I also use trekking poles when I'm crossing logs too. If it's not too bad, a pretty safe way to cross a log is for me to extend my poles all the way and have them touch the bottom of the riverbed. And I just, and I'm always stabilized. I got a couple points of contact as I use my poles on either side of a log or on one side. When it's too deep, I've actually used the poles on the log itself. Just if the log is wide enough, you can kind of just use a little bit of stabilization using the poles on the logs. Getting them to be the right length and everything for the task at hand is important before you start going across. Make sure you get your poles, your plan ahead of time. The other thing that I've done, much to Ryan's chagrin, is I have made staffs, like a 10-foot wooden staff. I'll just look around, grab something that's nearby. I'll chop that thing 8 foot long. It's heavy and it's long. And with that, I can put that in a swift current, like stick it in the water there, and I might have 2, another heavy one on the other side. They fight the current because they're heavy, and I can walk across and have 2 more points of stability, having 2 heavy staffs in my hand, kind of stabilizing me as I cross the log. And that might be the solution when it's chest deep and you brought waders. You might hike to where you can find a log and get across, but you want to get across somewhat safely. So those are some tactics. But trekking poles, I recommend sissy sticks made by Peaks, plus they're a big partner of ours. So everybody should have them. Carbon fiber upper, aluminum lower. Use the code GRITTY and save. And get yourself the gaiters. I mentioned this before. Crossing in gaiters is an option as well. I said this in a podcast the other day. A lot of guys don't realize, but if the water is coming up to the top of the gaiter, below the top of the gaiter, somewhere below the top mid calf, and your boot only comes up, halfway of that, you can still like splash your way across to the other side pretty quick. And as long as you're not in the water for too long, even though the water is above the height of your boot, it takes it a bit to go under the gaiter and then up inside. And the more that you've got that gaiter tight and sealed down, and the quicker you're in and out of the water, the more you can you can cheat that way. You're running the risk you get a little bit of water in your boot if you do it, though. But I've done it a lot, especially I was moose hunting in BC, and we had a moose up on the hill, and we were trying to get there before it got away, and it was miserably cold. And I was like, well, it's knee deep right here in the water. And I had rain pants on, and I'm like, and gaiters. It's like, well, knee deep. And we ran across this thing. It's about 18 feet wide. And I was just splash, 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 trying to keep my each foot in the water as slow as possible. Splash to the other side. I thought for sure I'd be wet. I was dry. Boots were dry. Inside of my boots were dry. It was knee deep, a little over knee deep.
That's cool.
And just slogged our way across as quick as we could. And so you can get away with it. You're surprised what you can get away with a good pair of gaiters on there. So Peaks makes gaiters. Check them out. This time I did a number of log crossings, and he and Mark Livesey had to film it because one of these days they want to catch me making the mistake of a lifetime, falling off a log with 100-something pound pack into a river and flowing away.
There ain't even no floating. You're going to be pinned in your back underwater.
It's definitely got its risks, and that's where trekking poles and knowing your limits,
and pistols. That's where pistols come into play.
So anyway,
if you can do 50 pistols, you can cross a log.
Yeah. One-legged squats, you mean? Yeah. So e-scouting. Make sure you know your area, and if there's a potential that you're on one side of a canyon and on the other side you see the animal you're after, that you have a way to get to it safely. Like you have the right gear. And like I said, often when you're remote, you're ahead of the next guy because most of the time guys that go remote don't have a way to get across one of those barriers. So, so do your scouting ahead of time. And I would recommend, if you haven't taken the e-scouting course from Mark Livesey, do that at Treeline Pursuits. Use the code GRADY, get yourself a discount, helps everybody. But it's a stellar course. And using the skills you get from Mark, if you don't already, even if you think you know how to e-scout, if you haven't taken his class, you don't know. I don't care who you are. I can confidently say you don't know. Mark,
you don't know, Jack.
Mark knows things that will blow your mind. And he'll use many tools, not just one. I don't think Onyx Maps is the right tool for e-scouting, to cover all your e-scouting needs.
You use it on every hunt, though. But
it's the most used tool on the hunts
of 4 or 5 others
of the mobile GPS type apps as well. It is the most used. However, in conjunction with some other ones, it really changes the game. But like Mark teaches in the course, the real magic happens on your home computer. That's where the real scouting can happen. What you can do from your home computer with Google Earth, nothing else can compete with. That's mobile and on your phone. But once you hit the field, there's no tool I think better than OnX. But in certain situations, Gaia is the tool of choice. And there's other brands, other map tools as well that Mark goes into. But anyway, check that out at Treeline Pursuits. Know what you're dealing with before you go out. Now, when you get out there, here are some tools. Pack Raft. We use pack rafts. I got a lot of emails and questions lately. I even got one from Corey Jacobson because he just came back with a monster pile of sheds on a shed hunting trip that he went on, where they knew there were just piles of sheds, but you hike in that far and they're on the other side of a big river. No one's getting those sheds, and they sure as heck demonstrated that because that raft was loaded with sheds. They had a major score. So pack rafts can make all the difference in the world because you can cross a substantial body of water and stay dry and cross it safely. So which raft do you get? For crossing rivers, it's really hard to justify something bigger than the Caribou. Ryan runs the Caribou. It's 5 pounds, right? The paddles are about a pound. The ultra light, Aquabound or whatever paddles that were Whiskey River something, The paddles that we're using that we got from Alpaca Rafts, they're a pound. And if you use the code GRITTY at Alpaca Rafts, you get 10% off. It's going to save you $100 or $200 depending on what you get. But we pretty much can't live without rafts now. We're spoiled. We take them on any hunt where there's a potential that we have to cross a river. Mm-hmm. We got them in our bags because it's only 5 pounds. The paddle's another pound. And for crossing, it's pretty tough to beat. You just inflate that thing. Mm-hmm. There's a cargo zipper to put gear and backpacks and things you don't want to get wet, boots or whatever, inside the actual raft itself. Mm-hmm. There's an airbag that you use to pump up the raft. It pumps up rather quickly. And then you just paddle across to the other side, get out, let the air out, stow your raft, and you're on your way. That's how Ryan killed one of his animals this year, once in a lifetime critter, and he got it because we were able to cross a river using the rafts. Now, we had a group of guys, and we only had 2 rafts. Now, I'm running the mule. Mm-hmm. The mule is 7 pounds. Okay, so it's 2 pounds heavier than the caribou. But what do you get from that? Well, you get about 150 pounds more carrying capacity. So I will admit that the caribou can take on water a little more. It's a little tinier. It's pretty small. It's not going to carry as much weight. But it is a little more maneuverable, and it handles quite well. Is it worth the extra 2 pounds for the extra weight you get to carry in a mule? I don't think so. So long as it's being run solo. So here's what I mean. If you're going to bring one raft for 4 guys, the caribou won't do the job. It's too small. One raft for 4 guys, because if you're going to ferry everyone across with one raft, you need, at minimum, a mule. And what that does is you get one guy's backpack and his gear, or 2. You ferry over like all the gear, drop it off. Guy rows back, picks up a dude, drops him off, rows back, and you ferry back and forth. Okay. Now, if it's a pretty swift river, you got to pick the right entry point and exit points. So we're up high. We're usually glassing and checking the river to find the best crossing. And there's usually a slow spot in the river or a safe spot to cross from side to side. But it's kind of it depends. If it's a really slow river, you can just kind of cross to one side and cross back. But if it's a quick river, if it's flowing pretty fast, you're going to drift downstream quite a ways. Then you got to hike up on the bank and then float back across, pick the next guy up, drift downstream. You know what I mean? It's like this. It's kind of a pain. The more swift the river, the more difficult ferrying becomes. The more arduous, the longer it takes. Mm-hmm. So we saw a bear that we're after. We want to be there in sub 2-3 hours to kill that bear. But we have 4 guys going across. That's going to take time. You're not going to be quick about it. Now, let's say you're just going to cross to go hunt another area. You got all day. You just kind of ferry back and forth. In our opinion, the best situation, the best setup that we've been able to test and run with is each guy has their own caribou. Mm-hmm. Each guy has their own 5-pound raft and paddle. That's 6 pounds. Okay. And the life jackets that we're running, the life preservers that we're running are, they've got, they're about a pound, and I forget the brand. I'll talk about them on another show, but, they strap on and then you pull a lever and they inflate. Right. So they're not inflated. They're not taking up tons of space, and they inflate. And then they have a manual valve that you can blow it up with as well. So then you can, with the manual valve, you just blow it up as you're taking off. So it's ready to rock and you go ahead and go. But if you ran it flat and inflated it, if you felt like you needed it, you've got that option too. Brad it's cheaper just to buy the one that doesn't auto inflate at all, doesn't have a cartridge to inflate it, and you just blow it up. No big deal. So that's another pound. So with a 5-pound caribou, 1 pound paddle, and a 1 pound vest, it's 7 pounds total. And that's kind of the safest setup. And when you guys get in the water, everything you throw in there, boom, you're ready to go, and you just shoot across. Everybody can float, stuff their gear in their own boat. Everybody can climb in their own boat. They can paddle across in their own boat, get out at the exit point, deflate, pack up, and go. And it's fast. When Ryan and I are together, we each have our own boat. That's how we do it. And it's just, I don't need to worry about what he's doing. He's not worried about what I'm doing. We throw our gear in, we cross. We're on the other side. We get everything set up, and we head back up the mountain, reload our packs, and we head. It's quick. We're across in no time. It's a blip in the travel route, and we're on the animal. Ferrying, guys, takes, especially on a swift river, it takes every time you got to hike up the bank, you got to get in again, cross. And every time you ferry, you're taking unnecessary trips. Every time I go onto one side, have to walk up the bank and come back, I'm in the water on another dangerous cross. It could be semi-dangerous. Every time you're in the water and you got to hit these rapids and stuff, something could go wrong. So being able to enter one time and get out, it's efficient and safe. And whether you bring a life preserver, that also can be done through the scouting. If it's slow water neck deep, you don't need a life preserver. I'm going to say it. And you can hate all you want. Look, you can assess your own risk and be smart. Just like when I cross a log. They give me crap about it, but I'm like, okay, so I get wet. I'm not doing it over, a 40-foot drop into an alligator swamp. Okay. So you assess the risk and you do it. You could, in certain water, you definitely don't need a life jacket. It's not that big a deal. The other times that we use the boats, were in areas where there's spring melt and runoff. And a lot of times you in some of these remote regions, where is the trail? It's near the biggest tributary of water that goes through the area, right? Because it's already low country, flat, and the river's already been there. So they've, from the vast reaches up north in British Columbia to Alaska to the lower 48, remote areas often have trails that travel rivers, okay? But there's tributaries that come off, especially with snow melt, that feed into those rivers, and those rivers swell, and they get way worse after 2 weeks of 70-degree weather than they were the day you got there, right? And so you have your big river trail, and you're crossing tributaries that come in, and when you hike in, maybe it's ankle deep. But a week later when you're leaving, it's over your head and got rocks and boulders and waterfalls. So how are you going to cross? Let's say you came across barefoot, taking your boots off, but now you're screwed. Like, how do you get out of these remote areas when you have tributaries coming in from spring snowmelt? Well, again, that's where the boats give us the ultimate power. We just go to the mouth of the tributary where it joins the main river and the tributary. We just hop in and we paddle across, get to the other side. So we're just floating where the two rivers converge. And, we don't want to get sucked down the main river because we'd be floating the river if it was safe. Generally, it's not. We're just using the boat to get across a little chute. So where the tributary joins the main river, where the two converge, you can kind of hit the seam and then get across and safely dock on the other side. And again, gives you that ability to get through. So, the caribou with the lightest weight paddle and no life jacket would be a 6-pound setup. And for most situations where you're just using the boat to get across things, that's kind of all you need it for. Now, if you're going to float a whole river system, now that's a whole different ball game. In that situation, the caribou may not be your favorite boat. you might want a little bit bigger, more buoyant, boat. Although Ryan is in love with that little thing, but he's an experienced paddler. I'm much better than I used to be. And I would say that I'm going to stick with the Caribou myself as well. The only modification we really want to add to the Caribou at this point is a whitewater skirt to go over the top, because those boats are little low profile boats and water splashes into them. You can't avoid it. So you can either do a raft with a what's it called? Self-bailing bottom. So that just like a raft you take down the Deschutes River, it catches water, the water rolls out, but it's always got like a layer of water in the bottom. It just leaks out. But it can't get swamped because water it's got holes in the bottom. But the downside is you're always wet in there. With the whitewater skirt, and we still have to get our hands on one, but from what we can tell, when you have a whitewater skirt, for example, and the only thing is, I don't think they make a whitewater skirt for the Caribou.
Oh, really?
It was built for bikers who need to cross rivers.
They make everything
for mountain
by
bikers.
hand. They'll make you one.
I think we can get a custom one made for us, yes. But for the average consumer, maybe not. But
we'll see.
But the Caribou is it's the weight we want with a skirt over the top, because it just keeps that water from coming in. And it looks to me, we are leaning toward the skirt over the self-bailing for 90% of our rafting moving forward, because from what we talked to the guys about, and it seems to me that our biggest issue is water just kind of collects as it splashes over this tiny boat's bow, even though it's got the bulbous front, so you can put a mountain bike up there or your backpack or antlers or something. It's actually pretty, that skirt is pretty effective in keeping water out. And then you're dry and warmer inside than if it was self-bailing, So also, I think you could stuff some things in that bottom half of it there, and it wouldn't fall out as easily because you got that skirt over the top. Where right now, if your backpack goes out, unless you've lashed it down, it could go out. Yeah. Typically, we put everything in the pontoons anyway, and it's internal to the boat. Where the air goes, you have your gear as well. But you might want a bigger raft. So if you're going to be hunting elk or caribou, I think you're going to have to go with a mule. The caribou is too small. But for all the bear and mule deer hunting that we're doing, the caribou is ideal. But like I said, if you're going to float long distances, we have found you kind of need to have the self-bailing or the skirt on the top if there's any rapids whatsoever. Now, if it's smooth water and there's really not any rapids, then you can just run what we have right now. And it's the same setup we use to cross rivers with, because we're going for weight. The skirt adds like another pound, I think, and so does the self-bailing bottom. So you have to decide, what you're going for. So unless you're hitting the rapids, some level of white water, the standard Caribou is the ticket, man, with your paddle and a life jacket. Now, the other thing to think about is the bigger rafts, they start to add quite a bit more weight, but you get a lot out of them. But we haven't really found that you have to have the extra weight to get what you need. Like the mule seems to be able to handle elk, caribou, everything else in terms of load, and it's right on that edge, but it's right there with that capability. So, that's it for the boats. I think I hit most of that. The
only thing I might add is what about a suit? Don't they sell a?
Yes. So we've put on rain suits. We pretty much take, you just have your pants maybe on there, and I'll just wear the light merino top, and I'll put my rain gear over that. But the bottom, once it collects water in there, you're getting a little wet. If it's spring or summer, you get a little wet, it's refreshing. But when it's a colder temp, I think the dry suit is 1 pound.
It's dirt. It's
1.5
crazy.
pounds or
Yeah,
something.
it's something like that. Yeah.
And yes, the dry suit is a must. If I was going to go float Alaska or some other places, just having the dry suit on would be a game changer in terms of just. I mean, we've done some floats, and it takes all day, like 8 hours. I'm like, ugh. By the time we're done, I'm pretty chilled, even though I've got a rain suit on to block the wind because I had to bring the rain gear anyway, right? The whole idea for us was to go in as light as possible. So if I can use the rain suit sort of as a paddle suit, I ended up doing that, and it blocks the wind as you get wet. It blocks some of the wet, and you put a thin insulating layer underneath the rain jacket, and you're pretty good. You're going to be wet from the knees or waist down sometimes, but yeah, if I'm going on extended floats, Ryan and I have already talked about it. The dry suit's the way to go. We haven't tested it or used it, but that's the way to go. So we have those plans someday down the road, but we're not there yet. We haven't had that kind of trip built yet. But yeah, so that's the situation there. Now, let's say that there aren't any rivers like that you're going to need to cross. So in that case, don't bring the rafts. Bring Chota hippies, which Ryan used extensively on this last hunt. You can always bring a pair of Crocs, and you just put your Crocs on, and you pull your pants up and you cross, because Crocs don't weigh much,
They're almost negative weight. They're so light.
But then it takes time, because let's say you have 6 or 7 of these crossings in one day. Every time you cross, and you got to take your socks and your boots off and stash them and walk across barefoot, you get to the other side, you got to dry your feet off somewhat and put your socks on. And if you wear 2 pairs of socks, which I wear a liner and then an outer, and then I got to lace up my boot. And if I have an ankle brace, because it's like, dude, I don't want to take my boots on and off, on and off, on and off every time I got to cross. It's refreshing on a hot day, but it's taking up time. And quite a bit of time, 15 minutes, Times so
5.
Ryan is able to quickly just take his boots off, socks, braces, whatever. Those stay on. Slips on the Chotas. They come up to like your crotch, right? And they're just neoprene booties, and he just walks across, gets to the other side. His feet are completely dry, socks, everything, pulls them out, puts his boots right back on, ties them up, throws the waders on his pack, and he's ready to go. And they're light, like a pound or something. So seeing him do that over and over and over, and how quick he was on this particular hunt, would have been nice to have more than one set. Mark did the whole wearing Crocs. Slower, not as efficient, and then I just took my boots off and went barefoot. But most of the time I crossed a log, which they never crossed a log because they don't do that. I think it adds to the thrill of the hunt. Plus I'm like a gymnast. So we would cross that way. So I like the Chota hippies. And the guys, I think in Alaska, Kodiak, they were using them. Cole Kramer and others were using the same things up there. And you could also bring a normal pair of waders that come up, chest waders or something, and pack those. They're just heavier, and there's a lot more to them, and they're a little overkill. And if I am wading in water that comes up above my waist, I'm thinking maybe I need a boat instead of waders, because a lot of times that's too swift. The water's too swift to be that deep. It's not slow moving water. If you're going to go waist deep, man, it better be pretty slow. Otherwise you get knocked off your feet and you're going downstream. You're holding your pack over your head and you're hauling it across. That's not my jam. I'd rather have a pack raft at that point and just scoot across real quick in a nice raft. So the waders above the Crocs. That's my recommendation. I think Chota, you might look it up. It's CHOTA, Chota Hippies, and they have a new version that's the Chota Tundras or Chota Hippie Tundras, and it's made out of, I think they're about the same weight, but it's just made out of a material that's much more puncture resistant for the hiking. Now, some people ask, do you have wading boots to go with the waders? Mm-hmm. No, we typically just walk across in the neoprene booties. That's what Ryan does because it's round rock in the bottom. Then he never punctures them. He's just gently walking through the round rock, the river rock. It's not really a thing. But if you're going to walk on land with them, it's going to be swampy or whatever. You probably do need some type of wading boot or shoe to go with it, or a Croc. Crocs don't weigh anything. You can throw those Crocs, and then those Crocs are also multi-use. Like Livesey is wearing his Crocs in camp all day, every chance he gets, cruising around with them. So, that combo is probably lethal. So when I go to Alaska, I scouted, do I need a boat for this grizzly bear hunt? No, there are no rivers really that are more than, crotch deep that we're going to be dealing with. So I've got the Chota Hippies. That's my river crossing tool. And I don't think I'm going to bring Crocs because as I spoke to the guys, we're not in swampy, boggy areas. I won't be really walking with the Hippies on except to cross streams. It might look a little more like New Zealand, where Ryan and I hunted chamois and tar, where you got some pretty good cricks running, and then once you get through those, it's pretty solid ground. It's just, those set. So we don't need it for swampy lowland country, as we're going to be up in some mountains in Alaska looking for mountain grizzly bears. So that's my choice, Chota Hippies. So I don't think I'm going to bring Crocs. Now, you don't have to bring 3 or 4 pairs of Chota Hippies either. Mm-hmm. If you got 2 or 3 guys and it's a 10-foot crossing, or even 20 feet, you can stuff those gaiters into like a stuff sack or something right after I get done with them, and I can hawk that bag across the creek to Brad. Brad can don them, cross, and the next guy, you can share the same pair each time you cross. Mark tossed me his Crocs a couple times. Mm-hmm. And so he just crossed in his Crocs, threw them to me. I put them on and I crossed. And so you don't necessarily have to, each person doesn't necessarily have to have their own pair. Now, often we're run and gun. We're trying to get to our place fast. And because of that, it's nice to have your own pair because we see the animal, we're going for it. Just like we have our own boats, Ryan and I, we have our own waders. And so it's like you hit that spot, you throw the waders on, Chota Hippies, you cross, throw your boots on, boom, you're after it. Nobody has to throw a pair, wait for the next guy, anything like that, and you're on a roll. So anyway, I think that kind of sums up our water crossing strategies, what tools we're using. I think if you scout ahead of time, you can completely get the advantage. We were kind of guessing. I wonder how many people have hiked this far up the main trail and ever brought a boat, ever brought a pack raft of any kind. I wonder how many people that is. I think the list is stupid short.
Yeah.
And how many people have then crossed to the other side and actually hunted where we were hunting? I think almost no one. And we had wolves all over. I think it's just untouched. You had some big mature boars over there. Some of the biggest boars we saw were on the other side of the river. And you think about it, if guides and others, horsemen and stuff get back in some of these areas, how many of them brought something to cross a river with? Very few. So they're not accessing a lot of those animals that stay on that side of the canyon and across the river. They're protected and being hunted because guys can't get over to where they're at. They got the barrier. So they see him and they're like, "Oh, isn't that a nice bear or wolf over there?" But oh well, because we're not swimming that thing. It's spring ice runoff. By the way, if you fall into that water, a lot of that snow melt and you're in it for just a few minutes, you likely could die from hypothermia. It is so ridiculously cold. And if it's choppy or gnarly or
I think it only
rapids,
takes 15 minutes for hypothermia to set in.
not even 15 minutes. You get in that water for very long, your body locks up, your brain, everything panics. I mean,
Dude, if it's cold enough, I just dip in there and everything just seizes anyways.
I dove in on a 70-degree day, submerged and swam and a little bit, and and it was a semi-warm day with the sun out. Man, the head is your brain shuts off. It's so cold, so unbelievably cold. So it's dangerous. Definitely, the temperature of that water is cold. So you got to be, water's nothing to mess around with. Although I do think it's fun to shoot rapids that probably flip your boat over and all that. But Ryan, thankfully, is with us to keep that from happening. I'll probably die in a river before I ever die from a grizzly bear or something. But anyway, hope you found that useful. If you're interested in a pack raft, you want to get one, jump on it earlier than later because it takes them a while to get them built.
Mm-hmm.
And
like a 6-week lead time.
I don't remember, but if you use the code GRITTY, you're going to save a good amount there. I mentioned Tree Line Pursuits. Use the code GRITTY there for e-scouting and whatnot. And check both of those out. I think they're invaluable tools. So get yourself some Chota Hippies or other type waders. If you guys got any of your own strategies or experience with it, let us know. Kick it our way. We're always trying to learn and try new things. And 'tis the season to start stocking up on your backcountry meals. So you might want to check out the Backcountry Fuel Box from our buddy over at Cody Rich, Rich Outdoors. You sign up for that. It's a monthly subscription, and you get basically meals and foods and snacks and backcountry type stuff coming to your house on a regular basis.
With coupons for those items.
Yeah, you can get the stuff in the Backcountry Fuel Box at a much discounted amount, and then it exposes you to all sorts of new stuff that you've never seen before, backcountry foods that are pretty cool. I've been turned on to a number of them through this, and honestly, if you get that box for 4 or 5 months, you've got enough for a trip into, if you just save that stuff for a trip into a week-long expedition. It's a good way to get your food. It's less expensive than if you bought that stuff just at retail straight from the store. So check that out and use the code GRITTY over there, Backcountry Fuel Box. And also check out goat knives. We got goat knives with our buddy over at Travis Nowotny. He sent us these nice Yeti bottles right here for Christmas. Thanks. Thank you, Travis. But he's got the knife that goes around your neck. I like the all-in-one piece more than the bolt and exchangeable blade. But he's got new blades too. So if you do want the skinning blade or whatever, it's pretty legit. I would compare the one that I wear around my neck to similar function and quality as my altitude, Benchmade altitude that I used to wear around my neck all the time as well. It holds an edge. It's nitro steel. It's good stuff. And then the replaceable blade knife, I just think is a no-brainer. Don't get a Havalon. Get the one from Travis. It supports him and it supports us. Use the code GRITTY over there, and get yourself that deal.
So the replaceable blade one is the Capper Hunter TI.
Uh-huh.
The neck blade is the Tur. And he also came out with a fleshing blade. You see that?
That's what I was talking about. Yeah. That looks pretty cool. Mm-hmm. That would be nice on a bear hide. Getting all that extra stuff off the hide before you have to pack it out. It's heavy. So check out Goat Knives. They're a good partner of ours. Good friend. Travis is a good dude. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Stay gritty.